In a previous video, I discussed some stupid things I believed as a child, with ramifications that included a potential choking death and burning down my grandparents' house. Here are 7 more dumb things I once accepted as fact. While none resulted in property damage or potential loss of life, they're still very cringy. I'm an atheist, but won't discuss the merits of any belief system, or lack thereof, in this video. But at one time I was a practicing Catholic, albeit too young to understand anything other than there was a giant bearded man wearing robes in the sky wanting me to act one way, and there was a giant bearded red guy with a pitchfork under the ground wanting me to act in another way. But my belief was strong enough that I once convinced a fellow 5-year-old friend of mine to spend the better part of an afternoon stomping on the floors at his house just to piss off the devil, like we were inconsiderate upstairs neighbors in an apartment house. As difficult as it may be to comprehend, there was once a time before Star Wars. I remember because the original came out when I was 5 years old. Despite that movie, or more accurately its toy merchandising, comprising the majority of my childhood, when I first heard about the film I had no interest in it whatsoever. I figured it was going to be boring, because when I heard that the title had the word war in it, I assumed it was just like those old black and white World War II combat films they played on Sunday afternoon television. My knowledge of human physiology was just as sophisticated as my knowledge of appliances, traffic laws, and theology. I once spent a few hours on the toilet, not because I was sick, but because it was so annoying having to stop playing with my Star Wars action figures every so often to poop. I thought if I sat long enough on the toilet, I would finally get it all out of me and never have to waste time in the bathroom ever again. Before my Star Wars action figures became the center of my toy universe, anything close to that were usually cheap molded rubber dolls with skinny wires in the middle of the limbs to hold their positions. From this, I extrapolated that the human body was solid all the way through, and bones were just like the wires inside my dolls, and they helped keep my arms and legs straight. Blood, I assumed, was just a red juice you could squeeze out of the spongy flesh. Sadly, these biological misunderstandings didn't end at preschool. Like many, the first echoes of sexual awakening was a very confusing time, and growing up in the conservative Midwest didn't help matters. Apart from a not very helpful PBS show on the subject of human reproduction, which told 7-year-old me that eggs were somehow involved in making babies, so I pictured human women with chicken eggs in their privates, it wasn't until 5th grade that the local public school decided to help. And by help, I mean provide some ham-fisted explanation of human sexuality and show decades-old film strips of poorly drawn human figures. Because of how badly colored and faded these pictures were, for a long time, I thought sperm was green. And since this was long before the internet, I didn't even have the benefit of porn as a source of more accurate information. Because the schools were afraid of offending the razor-sharp sensitivities of conservative Christian parents, the sex ed we were provided didn't offer much practical advice. I don't just mean failing to answer common sense questions about things like oral sex or the different orientations of human sexuality. I mean some of the most basic aspects of sex. I used to think that intercourse didn't involve actually penetrating the vagina because I thought the vagina was like a belly button in that it was only maybe an inch deep. I thought it was the simple act of rubbing up and down against the girl's body that brought on sexual climax, and in order to impregnate them, you aimed your penis at the girl's shallow vagina to squirt your semen into it. My preteen mind was filled with smug incredulity at the stupidity of people who accidentally knocked up their girlfriends because they were simply too stupid to not have their penis pointed at the vagina when reaching orgasm. I have an aunt who I absolutely adore. She was raised in a rural setting, and her vocabulary was peppered with colorful expressions. Some of them were not exactly polite, but when she uttered them, they didn't really sound dirty at all. One of her favorite ways to describe the size of anything small was by comparing it to pubic hair, as in, that car missed me by a pubic hair. Again, the way she said it was cute, and it wasn't immediately obvious she was being dirty. To a 10-year-old who didn't know what the word pubic meant, it sounded a lot like cubic, and since she always used it while discussing size, I just assumed it was a math term or something from the metric system. One day in 6th grade science, I was discussing something with my teacher, and whatever it was must have been tiny because I said it was smaller than a pubic hair. I remember his eyes getting very wide, and he didn't say anything, but years later that conversation came back to haunt my sleep. This is obviously not a complete list of the moronic things I believed as a child, but just some of the ones that my old man brain has mercilessly kept from fading into the obscurity of fuzzy memory. Feel free to add your own embarrassing flashbacks in the comments. Any laughter will be in sympathy because no matter how smart I think I am now, my past is filled with cringe-inducing stupidity.